specific
Okay,
text.
this is what I
to support.
want to know. Are we gonna go through every single one of these and start to see if there's a pattern with these?
I would say
Or
if things-
what are we wanting to, like the overall goal that we want to pull away from this?
Well, I think if
Because
something.
otherwise we could spend a lot of time going over in each
Right.
of these and still not come to a conclusion
Yeah,
of what we
no, I
want to
would
do with
say
that.
where our biggest gaps are, where it's mostly white, and then see if there's a pattern, and then see, especially if there's a pattern, then how we can translate that into the small intervention group.
Okay.
Well, so far it's vocabulary. What do you think? Well, pin name.
Yeah,
Or
well,
synonyms or-
it's not paying close attention to the text either.
Right.
You know, but I mean, there is vocabulary, obviously,
Right.
to know that confused and mixed up, you know, are the same concept, but there's a lack of really going into the text and looking for the answer. I saw the same thing when I was doing the Saving the Rainforest. I mean, every single one of those answers was in the text. They weren't really even inferred. I mean, they were, you could go in and you could find them, but they weren't taking the time to just go in and find them. Which makes me think, you know, what we were talking about is that, you know, I get them doing all this writing and I'm having them create these graphic organizers and, you know, they're doing all this, but then there's these things that there's these holes all of a sudden that show up, you know, like they don't do then when they have to take multiple choice tests, they don't do well. You know, they can do all this other stuff, but when you then flip it and give them the graphic organizer and say, pull information from that, they can tell me, they can do the flip, but they can't do the other side of it. They can sit there and say, this graphic organizer is used for something but to draw information out of it. So it's, I do the one thing and then I don't necessarily do the other thing well. And so I don't have these passages where I sit there and say, let's find the answer, you know, type of thing. Instead, I'm doing, you know, finding the main idea, or but I'm not having them, because I'm always thinking, heck, it's right in there.
So maybe
You
that
can
would just
find
be a
it.
conversation, or, you know, one small little blurb to spend
Well,
time
I
on,
mean,
you know,
and
because
I mean, it could be
it's
just
not
on
that I want to do
anything
this.
too, because just like today, we're taking notes on quotations, right? When to use them, like in titles and such, when to underline, when, they wrote down the rules, 2 rules. And then when we'd go through up here, and I would say, okay, this is a story. So it's a story within a book, so what are we gonna do? We're gonna use quote, we're gonna underline, we're gonna use italic. I mean, they had just written it down. So what we did is we taught them, this is a resource. I mean, really basic. You just wrote it down, go back and look.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean,
It's a simple thing.
and definitely don't get
Look at
discouraged though.
this.
Overall, like if, I emailed the growth reports to you, and overall, if you look at those, like as I scroll down the page, like the growth is huge. I mean, I don't know if you realize, but it's just like it shoots up. Even if they're low in basic range still, it is huge on the majority of your kids. So even though like we might not have those numbers here, or they might not have gotten, like the growth is
It's still there,
above
making-
average, absolutely.
So am I hearing, though, if we look at this and find a pattern of like vocabulary or something, we could get some short passages that we could use during our intervention groups, that we can maybe give some more direct instruction on how to go back and find that? If it is vocabulary or those kinds of
Or,
things?
you know, that they become a little more test savvy or something, because, I mean, we don't know exactly what the test is gonna look like next year, for 6th grade, but I know what coming up with the MAP test, I'm always surprised that they don't have as much, I mean, the word was, it was all gonna be constructive responses, you know, we were all going that way. And then I'm always shocked that there's just a couple of them, and most of them are multiple choice, which then always makes me think, I didn't do a very good job of teaching multiple choice very well. I've got them writing and doing all that.
So that's what I would do. If we think it's a multiple choice problem and a vocabulary problem, well, let's find some passages we can practice on that. So if we kind of go through here and find that pattern, then we can decide what resources we'll use to practice that.
And then time consuming, but, you know, even within this, if you wanted, I've still got the kids' names on there, so if you wanted to go through and see which kids got it wrong, you know, then they have the student item analysis reports too, if you wanted to take it a step further. So, I mean, not everybody needs to do those things.
Right.
especially the text evidence,
Yeah.
since that's been so drilled, it's probably just a handful.
So is there any way that we can, when it says additional skills assessed, is there any way that we know what that skill is?
Just by looking
Just
at the
by looking at
question.
the test, that's the best way for me,
Okay.
because I can't make, it says that no matter if we do the Missouri report or the Common Core, it shows additional skills covered, so it's just easier, I think, to
Because
go and
both,
look at the question.
both of,
Three and
the
four.
two that we have gone over,
Mhm.
that's what it says, additional skills covered. And then 11 that's another one they did poorly on, additional skills covered.
So,
Right.
number 3 was a vocab, synonyms.
Yeah, I mean,
Number,
but it was also being able to sit there and say, they went to, I mean,
Find
and it
evidence.
was the distractor, I mean, it's a distractor, the
Mhm.
one that's the most, I mean, they're picking the most likely next
Obvious
to,
one.
yeah. I mean, it's not a bad choice, I mean, if you had to go and say you chose wrong, you at least chose the best wrong one.
Exactly.
Which I don't know if that says anything. But there is some, there is some thought process
Right.
going behind it, but we're always constantly teaching, so I find that these kids, they make these logical mistakes. They're sitting there saying, I'm always saying, use your background knowledge. Your background knowledge helps you. So we use our background knowledge and we say, they're ordinary. My background knowledge says they're ordinary.
Yeah.
And sure enough, you go ahead and get a majority of people saying that. And I see that, and I remember reading this book where they said that you will see when they're trying to learn these things, they will make these mistakes that, because they're just so strict on applying something, that it's like with possessives. You start adding an S and then it doesn't matter. Anytime you start to see an S
there's
now,
an apostrophe.
and it's a logical conclusion, they see it's plural. There's more than one. They
But
just
you're
forget the
going
part,
to that real transfer of knowledge.
Yeah,
So, if you think about Common Core and that being the big idea of that, them being able to transfer their knowledge, then what are we doing to ensure that that's,
yeah.
You
The
know?
best thing that I've been able to do is sit there and with any of this is say, I don't care if you get it, make them write what they have on their whiteboard, and they're hesitant to do that because they know they don't have it, they're not sure about it. I said, that's the point. You're not sure. But I don't know where you're off unless I start to see it and you start to see it. If you want to every single time put an apostrophe on anything that's plural, we can begin to say, you see this, what belongs to what? I go, but you got to get out there and try. Even if it's wrong, we got to get to the bottom of your thinking of what's going on here.
Well,
And
the
so,
fact that you're aware of that shows, I mean, because it's just one piece of data.
Yeah.
And so the other thing I was hoping to do with this is just see, is it, consistent with what you're seeing in your formative assessments? And obviously it is, because you know what the issues
Yeah.
Don't you
are,
think kids
so-
too use background knowledge just to use it? Like, it's easier to just know it than to look for it?
oh yeah.
Yeah, or they will look for
And they
anything
have
that
an
feeds that
incorrect
first thought, and whatever they're thinking, they look for evidence to support their thinking. So, you see what I'm
Right,
saying?
right.
So they'll go for that.
Right.
Because that's what supports their thinking.
But you know what? That's what research says everybody does. It's, they say,
Oh,
they
well,
research.
sure.
Yeah, I mean, literally.
In life, we all look for
You
evidence
sit
to
there
support
and
our
you
decisions.
You sit there and you go ahead and,
Yeah.
that's why you can't listen to, that's why they say you can't listen to
Right.
opposing
So they
opinions.
don't look further.
Because you only are trying to hear what you have decided,
Right.
and you
That's
push out
right.
everybody else's, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Which, somehow we have to push back on that,
Okay, so anyway, so if we go back, what number did you say was next? 11, Tanya?
11.
Which is what?
It just says, which of these excerpts from the story hints that Miguel's father has a solution to Miguel's problem? Most students chose A. Miguel smiled back, relieved that his father was changing the subject. The answer was C. Papa tilted his chair back and smiled. It's been an excellent year for us at the store.
So they said if most of them chose
A.
then it's a misleading hint about the outcome.
Yeah, and it's inferred, I mean, obviously this is
Mm-hmm.
but yet, when they wrote about it, I was surprised at how many of them could sit there and say, they used that as a text detail to say why he knew that he was gonna go ahead and help him out with his
See,
education.
mine did not.
They didn't?
No. No, very few of my students made that connection.
Yeah, most of them, I was surprised at how many of them said it's been an excellent year, and that's the way they knew that the father,
But they couldn't answer it in multiple
But-
choice.
they're not answering in multiple choice, see, so. I know, cause I mean.
Is that
I'm
bewitched?
thinking.
Blink your eyes and they'll all be proficient.
That's a good sign then for this Common Core test.
Yeah, but it's been a real bummer for the mapping to some degree, and you have to sit there and say, this is the test you're taking, and can they do that same information and still take it in this multiple choice form?
Right,
So that one really didn't have anything to do with background. I mean vocabulary, it was more
making that
inferencing.
inference.
Making an
Yeah.
inference. being
So maybe
able to-
that's where Tanya.
I mean,
your
it
kids
is
being
background
treat,
knowledge.
It is what it is, this is what he did, this is what he said, then they weren't able to do that.
Yeah, because I mean, yeah, that didn't transfer at all in the
And there is some background knowledge that sits there and says, when a person goes ahead and says this, and then my background knowledge tells me that they are gonna go with this, but if you don't have that kind of savviness to know a person does that, then you go with, A.
Yeah, several of my students wanted to say that, go into just, that he had to hire somebody new.
Right.
He didn't want his son to go to school, which is the opposite
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
exactly
And-
what.
and
He was
almost-
trying
I
to
would say,
do.
I was surprised it had this.
I mean, it was
Most
the
of my
direct
kids got it.
opposite
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
of what was happening.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of them. Let's say 50%. So, but some of them got it, and they did put that in there. Okay, 12. We're all over, the only reason I'm bringing this one up is because we're all over the place. I mean, we don't have one, like, if you look, A, C, D, A, B, C, D, A, D. I mean, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, there's not
The
anything
answer is B, right? On that
I haven't
one?
heard you say 1B.
Yeah.
There's a few greens there.
Yeah, there is. So, I mean, like, there's no clear-cut thinking at all
Mhm.
on that one.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, which of these best describes how working at his father's store causes Miguel to feel conflicted about his future?
but see, he wants to work, and I can see why they're all over the place, because what? Miguel wants to work in the government.
He
Well,
does.
that's conflicted. He wants to work in the government, so working at his father's store. It's just that the best one is because he wants to work in the government, he misses all the schools, so he's not going to be able to, and they're not seeing that. They just say, they know he wants to work in the government, that's causing conflict
So it's
for
another
him.
inference.
Yeah, and so what they're doing is they're drawing the wrong conclusion, about
Except,
it.
I mean, like, you've got them answering C and D. A lot of them answered, I mean, yeah, it looks fairly
But
even.
see, which of these best describes how working his father causes him to be conflict about his future? He doesn't like to
C
lift heavy
is not
boxes.
mentioned in there at all.
What is C?
He
He does not like to have to lift the heavy boxes in his father's store.
It's not mentioned anywhere.
But that's
in
them, they might think,
But yeah,
You know,
they're like,
I'm
yeah,
not
yeah,
gonna do
that would make me feel conflicted. Gil thinks he would make more money as a business owner than he would for the government, and that's not it. That would
That's
be
not
that would
right
be
either.
yeah. That's them just
Mhm.
presupposing that hey, if I felt that way, I wouldn't want to do it either.
Okay.
So that's an inference. So we're kind of vocabulary and inferencing.
which is consistent with what you guys work on all the time.
Anyway,
Because you
yeah.
have your weekly vocab with the
Mhm.
context clues that you do, and then inferences are constant, so.
Yeah,
I'm
and at
just-
least that is multiple choice, and that's and then what you gave
Uh-huh.
me with text structures. Laura's bringing more things to me that I can go ahead because I'm like, I'm not doing well. I don't think with multiple choice, so she's been bringing me stuff.
Uh-huh.
So it looks more like what they're going to go ahead and see.
But I think really with that writing is where we're going to see the transfer, and then we're putting it into graphic organizer, so it's good that that's what the majority of the focus is on.
Yeah, that, I mean, in my mind, what's the real life situation? The real life situation is you have to organize information. You have to be able to go ahead and process a text and be able to say, how am I going to tackle this?
Man.
If I'm going to be successful.
Right.
And I think if they can do that, then, it seems like the Common Core is looking at that also.
Right.
18, I circled the wrong one, so I can't see very well. 18, 19. And then most of the kids on 18, they're kind of all over the place, but I think C is what they mostly chose, and then 19,
What was the answer?
on 18, D
Yeah.
was the answer. And then on 19, C is the answer, and then most of the kids chose A.
See, you would think,
Author's
You would
purpose
think-
is one.
you would think D, that the author most likely wrote this passage, that they would get that it was to inform them about Arabian horses and how they were brought to the United States. You know, each one of those others is true, but there was just a snippet of it. It wasn't the overarching.
So we're on a new passage.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that passage is also difficult because it's all about like bloodlines with horses coming across
Ancestry
from
and
Europe.
ancestry.
And I mean,
It's difficult
Yeah.
yeah,
passage.
and ancestry.
They, they don't really know anything
It-
about it.
Yeah, because we talked about that after the first or second, I don't remember which, it was A or B predictive, there was a writing, one for that, and it's just, I mean, they have to infer and understand all of that, and it's tough.
Yeah, it is.
And then on 19, read, children could ride and handle them, but they were spirited enough for the most expert rider. Which of these best explains what this sentence means? They chose A,
Horses ridden by both children.
which, why wouldn't they?
Children could ride and handle them, but they were spirited enough for the most.
Okay, this is the
Yeah.
difference between the answers A and C. A is wrong. The horses were ridden by both children and experts. C, the horses could adapt to the abilities of the riders from children to experts.
Yeah, and
That
that's looking up.
is difficult.
It is difficult. Because they're saying.
So you have to
children-
really know, like, in the text, if the main idea was more about the horses adapting, or who could ride them. That's the
Yeah.
difference in the
They'd have
answers,
to
right?
see, yeah, that the text was about these horses.
Not about the
and
people
how
riding
great
them.
they are, you know, yeah, not about the people that rode them. But
Well,
they're,
because
but they're
chil-
only looking at straight at this. It
Sure.
says children and experts.
Yes,
And going with that, not that the horses turned around and adapted, and that's what made them so marvelous and a great breed to bring over.
And does it mention children in here also, Z?
Well, this is from,
Remember?
it's from the passage. I think that's the only one I know of, children. But it
what
doesn't
did they
say
choose on number 18
Oh, it
about
says
the,
children could ride and handle them,
that. Yeah,
but they were spirited enough for the most expert rider.
yeah.
and they needed to know it was more of a focus on the horse than it was on the rider, basically, right? Am
Yeah.
I thinking right? So 18, question 18 was the author's purpose, and it was to inform
To
them.
provide,
And
yeah,
I think
inform them
it's
about
very
Arabian
good
horses
too.
and how they brought them to the
What did
United
they
States.
choose?
They chose,
Inform the reader about the travels and experiences of Lady Aunt Blunt and her husband.
yeah,
It's
because it
main
starts
idea.
off, because she brought they are the ones that brought them over here to.
But the passage
England.
was
But
mostly
they're
about the
Arabian,
horses.
yeah, and they get stuck on that.
And, I mean, you guys have been, in the past couple weeks, I know, hitting that main idea pretty hard. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
difficult
so this,
for a
I mean,
lot
this
of
was, I mean, since you guys were at the beginning of the window and before all the snow days, you did
Yeah.
take this a while ago. So
Mhm.
since then, like,
Mhm.
this may have even been improved
Mhm.
with all your work on main idea.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, just to be able to go ahead and first of all, sit there and say, well, what kind of piece? See, this would make a difference. If they knew this was a descriptive piece, which it was, a descriptive piece, then the main ideas are being described. Well, what are those main ideas that are being described? It's about these horses. And if they'd stop and think that through,
Right.
then they'd be able to pull this out. Oh, this is the most descriptive about this particular thing. But that's probably the most difficult one out of, I mean, they're doing pretty well with problem, solution, and cause and effect, but description ones are a little bit trickier for them. They have to keep thinking, I think, a few characteristics, you know, and this type of stuff.
Oh, 20 is a big
It
one.
appears to me
Very
that if
few.
we could find some passages on, you know, whatever it may be, that has to do with infancy, main idea, that have some very similar answers, and really practice with small groups, if you look at these kids, and really practice with them on what is the difference between this answer and why is this answer better?
Yeah.
Because it sounds to me like that's a lot of this. The answers are so similar in all of the ones you guys mentioned that there's just one keyword or something separating those answers.
It is, and, you know, I mean, as I said,
Could you
it's,
not even use this?
Yeah, I mean, I think.
Can we?
I
Is that
think-
something we can do?
I think now, because since Acuity's done as far as predictives
Uh-huh.
go, they're not gonna see this passage again this year. I mean, it's not like we need to do it, so I would say that it would be
I
fair
can
game.
tell you, I could probably give this test to them in pieces, and they would still go like,
Mhm.
we can do this.
I'm wondering if you put your kids in small groups, kind of based upon how they did on these answers, and just really talk about why these answers are different and why this one's better.
Yeah, I did the four corners, you know,
Mhm.
with the, that Tanya had done too, with the rainforest one, because those tests do tend to be the same way, they have,
Yeah.
they're very close, and so, it was interesting for them to do the same thing, talk, why did you pick it, and then explain to the group.
And you could even do that with,
Yeah,
you know.
I kinda like the idea of getting them in small groups though,
Mhm.
first of all, to talk it out, then go ahead and put them in the four
Especially if they're
corners.
all over, because,
Yeah.
you know, you're gonna have some kids that probably are green all the way across.
I mean, because we could just take one passage, you know, sometimes it's test fatigue too after a while.
Uh-huh.
But just take one passage here and then do this.
I mean, that's kind of a pattern I see right now, that you guys are saying, except for that one you said they're all over, that it really
Yeah, but the
is
rest of them are pretty
close.
consistent.
There's
Yeah.
like one word in the answers that's changing it.
But even the one that they were all over on, you could see that there was a possibility for them to be all over on that one.
Except for
There's
D.
enough,
C and D,
yeah,
that wasn't even mentioned in the passage.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But
Except
that's
that
where
when
they,
they're-
they
that's
find
where they
something
went
that confirms their thinking
Yeah,
and they
uh-huh.
go with it,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. And that's where we have to sit there and say, that's not true.
Right.
But it didn't say it in the passage.
Yeah.
You know, you can't, and that's bad thinking on
And
their
it's just
part.
like the one with the children, it does not say that children rode those horses. It said that they could
Yeah.
ride those horses. It doesn't say that they did.
And there
So,
wasn't even an
you know,
emphasis on it
No.
at all, either experts or anybody,
No.
it's not on the writing of them.
Okay, the next big one that, I mean, I would say, just looking at it, maybe
Everybody got it wrong.
15% of our kids got it right, maybe 20. It is prediction. If Mrs. Tinkersley had not bought 32
They got
Crabble
this wrong last
horses,
time, too.
what would most likely have happened? Most of them chose A, the Arabian breed would not have survived. The answer was B, the narrator would not have had an Arabian colt.
But they never got that the Arabian, and they never really got that idea that the
I was
narrator
gonna say, 'cause
had an
that's what they
Arabian
had to
gold.
infer
Yes, they had
and
to infer the
understand.
first one and that, yeah, and they were, that one went over their heads.
An Arabian what?
Colt.
Okay, see, I haven't read the story, so it's kind of hard for me,
Yeah.
but.
I mean, every time this passage has come up, they have struggled with it, and so, yeah, I mean, if they didn't get that inference to begin with, then they aren't gonna get that one right.
Yeah. I mean, I think
very-
It would be
I,
kind of neat to
Very
see,
few got it
like,
right.
you
Oh, it tells
know,
you right here,
like
28% of
retesting
them
on
got it
this
right.
passage after you could do some real direct
yeah, and
instruction.
just see, and
Just
then,
kind of see where they're at. I don't know, just because it's so difficult,
Yeah.
It
you know. I don't know.
28% of them got it right. There's a percentage at the bottom, which is pretty cool. Tells you how many of the whole entire.
And you can do this
Population got
per class, you know, you can pull up the IM analysis per class too, and then, you know, it's easier to see on the computer, but like it just goes on and on and on, so, you know, when you print it, you have to scale it down, it won't show.
The only other one that we had 51% on, that was our last lowest one,
What's
was
this one? 2.
63,
Oh.
was 23. We just barely had even half of them get it right. The answer is D.
did they go with, did a lot of them go with B?
Let's see here. C.
C.
Most of them went with C,
This is
There- there are a few
allow
Bs.
students to rebuild the garden.
but most of them went with C. There's a few Bs, not a lot.
Well, see,
Here
and
at
look
the
at
bottom
the
there is-
difference. Mrs. Splendorio agrees to allow the students to rebuild the garden, which is true. The big one is the class begins to work together to develop a plan for a new garden. And so there's
She
not
works
much,
with them
yeah, to rebuild, I can see,
Yeah.
it's logical of how you end up with rebuilding, because in a sense, they were rebuilding it. They're doing the whole thing over there,
When these
But this is what it
answers,
says in the text. I mean, this to me is just very
Mhm.
text evident. The next day, Ruby and Michaela told their class about their idea. Right away, kids started coming up with ideas.
Mhm.
See, to me, they should be able to get
say
that.
that's a plan.
Because it's
Mhm.
sequencing too. If you
Uh-huh.
go back in the story and find out when they present it, then you're gonna find the answer as to what happened.
When these answers are these close in multiple choice, and we've kind of determined that that's what's happening, there's like a word or something that's throwing them, are they picking the first one?
I think.
So
that
are
they're-
they reading all answers carefully?
I think they're reading all answers carefully, but they're not doing the next step. They could say maybe there's something between the two of them, but they're not specifically going back to
To
check
text.
to the text to say, which one is it? They're going then off of, well, I've been reading about the rebuilding, and they choose that.
Right.
Instead of saying, did it specifically, what
Mhm.
did they say? And even here, you're gonna have to infer, kids right away started coming with ideas, getting the money, that means they're gonna make a plan. It's,
And on a few of the other ones, it was the first one that sounded mostly right,
Mhm.
that they happened to go with.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're getting that kind of in their head and then that's probably kind of not allowing them to read the other choices as carefully though, because they're like, I read that first one
Yeah,
and it's right.
that sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
And I know that, I find myself, even when I take multiple
yeah.
choice, I make a little dot. that
'Cause they get
seems reasonable,
tired.
and,
You know,
So,
so.
when I've been giving the, just the Saving the Rainforest test, which is
Mhm.
multiple choice,
Mhm.
and I mean, they'll call me over there, Miss Baker, it could be any one of these answers. You know what I'm saying? And they've got their little dots right
Yeah.
there. They're like, this is all in there. But it's just being able to find that little glitch, that little
Mhm.
different, that makes the answer correct.
yeah. But when
So-
if they really looked at the question, it became startling how it was pretty evident it was one over another.
But they have to understand
But they really
that.
have to, but that, yeah.
They have to
get bogged
understand that
down,
question.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask you too, while we're here real quick, did you give many zeros on the constructed response? On either
That's-
one of them?
That's the colored one on the end, so you'll be able to see.
Right here, right
I think-
here?
I believe so, yeah, yeah.
I know, but I
too.
can't see the names, I just wanted a ballpark figure.
No, the first one, this was probably the best I've ever given
Zeros are
on.
red,
Orange.
orangish.
Yeah, I didn't get very many zeros.
Are you colorblind? I'm lying, you're colorblind.
I mean, on either one of them,
So all the zeros, I'm sure, are mine.
so, I mean, as I said, this was probably the best they've ever done. I had on the last one, on the Arabian one, I
And that might be
gave more
something-
zeros than I've ever given in my whole entire life.
Well, and that might be something that we could do maybe even next year, like actually bring the constructed response in. How would you score this? How would you score this? Just to make sure we have some consistent, not that it wasn't consistent, yours might really have been zeros, I don't know, I'm sure they were, if that's the case.
If they,
But-
Tanya's like, they were saying the opposite.
Yeah, it would be the opposite, but it would be interesting to see.
But the ones
The
that said the
differences.
opposite, I gave
Yeah.
zeros, they're not all yours. I
Right,
did give them.
right.
But I didn't give a lot of them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So then, what are you guys thinking that we could do?
I like the idea of taking time. It's not gonna take that long to go ahead and read a passage and,
Just from this, right?
well, and what I'd like to do is, and I don't know what you guys think, is I want to enforce that idea of where did you get the information from the text? So I'd like to do it on a whiteboard, to sit there and say, what's your answer, and then what's the evidence that made you pick that answer? And that we just keep saying, you've got to, no matter what, even if you think you're 100% sure, double check with the text to make sure that's correct.
Or give them a page and, I don't know how much copying this would be, but let them highlight it. I
Yeah.
used to take it and they would highlight it and then they'd have to number it. Like if it was question number 1, they'd have to highlight it in the text. So that way, no way was it coming from their
Yeah.
brain. Well, you want them to make the connection,
Right.
but I'd have them highlight and put number 1 by it.
Mhm.
And then you can really see, if they're just way off. But then that forces them, because on a whiteboard they can still write. unless you made them write word for word, but they could also highlight and number them.
Yeah.
If you're doing small group, if you're not
Yeah.
doing a whole class, if you're just doing small group, you could copy that off easy for them and make them highlight it, number it, where that answer came from.
Yeah, and they would probably.
Because even if they have to make an inference, you still have to make an inference
Yeah.
from something.
Based on something that you read.
Yeah.
Because it has to be the text plus your
Yeah.
background. Yeah.
I don't know, just an idea.
Yeah, well, some way to get into their
Yeah.
thinking, and, I mean, for us to see what's in their heads, but for them also to see, you're not doing the right process here.
Mhm. And I don't think it's necessarily something you'd have to do whole group if you could look at your kids' names and, I mean, unless the majority of your class had trouble with the nonfiction
Right.
piece, because it still sounds to me like they did pretty well in the fiction, right? Was the first story fiction
No.
about
I
the
don't know if-
store
I don't-
owner or the
Probably.
business
I think
owner?
both of these are, aren't they? Because it's the.
Oh, the Arabian,
The
was it
Arabian
nonfiction?
Was nonfiction, the Arabian was nonfiction.
Was it nonfiction?
I don't know,
Yeah.
I thought
I
they
couldn't
were
remember
all.
if it was a story, it's been so long, I can't
No,
remember if
it's,
it was a story
and the
within it, or.
the Marvel guy, Stan Lee, that was
Nonfiction.
nonfiction. But the one about Miguel was fiction,
Fiction.
and the
And
one
Garden
about the
was,
garden was
yeah.
fiction.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, there's 4 stories in there?
Uh-huh.
So it sounds like 2 they had the most difficulty with, right? Definitely the Arabian one.
Yeah, the Arabian one.
Yeah, because, I mean, they have to really jump through some thinking on that one. They really do, to answer some of the questions.
So just because of the level and the high expectations in that one, that'd probably be a really good one to focus on. Can they highlight in the map book?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
they
we
can
used to
underline.
have to erase that, but we don't anymore, as long as it's not within the markings, but where they say don't mark in this area. So, I mean, they can underline, you
They
know.
can't highlight. They
But I
can't
think
underline.
like, what they were always worried about is that they would tear it while they were
Uh-huh.
doing that, you know, so then.
I just wonder sometimes even overall, even if you practice that right now, but overall, if we don't start making them do that. Maybe it's just something we can do. Anything you have them answer, they have to underline in text.
But as I was going through the growth reports too, like
Beautiful
what-
growth reports,
Oh my
by the way.
Yeah, I mean, I tried to I first
Both
just
of
started
you.
writing down anybody that was like low growth from the A to B and low growth from B to C, because then I thought that is a big
Yeah.
red flag. There were maybe a handful in the whole grade that were even like that, and so then I'm like, well, what am I gonna write down? I'll write down like maybe ones that were really close to proficient or whatever, but even that, it was like, they were making some significant gains across the board. And honestly, the ones I started writing down, they're ones that I always see in the makeup testing room because they're absent and I have to hunt them down, and so I saw a pattern with that. Or, some of them were ones that, also were struggling with math too, so it's interesting, maybe a little bit of behavior mixed in there with yours. I mean, it looked really good. So, and then here's your, I know you guys probably have these too, but the
Are these the
assessment.
names that you wrote down?
Yep, just so you can see if you wanna compare it to your, and
These
then like,
were the ones that did,
Okay, this kid right here, very smart.
capable.
He told me, I can't say what I want to say, but yeah, he did not give any effort whatsoever. He's
This one?
advanced,
This one?
yes.
This one.
He's out, he's been
Is
out.
he?
There's your assessment report.
But he is pretty lackadaisical, what you say.
But then like up at the top, I started writing all these wow people because they were so huge, and like these, like the Trinity, Beverly, Kyle, like Jaheim, oh
Those
my
were
gosh.
good big growths.
Yes, huge.
yeah, and some of them were just straight up.
Even ones that on yours, because you have some of the higher
It's
ones,
helped.
and even
It's
ones
helped.
that were already
It's
in
helped.
advance, like they're
It's
hitting the
helped.
roof.
I know, I know.
You know, it's like
Beverly,
normally when they're up high,
We
you don't
switched
see a
out
ton
Jared
of
Smith,
growth.
me and Beverly
you know?
Yeah, yeah. This was one that really
So
stood
he
out
stays
to
with
me.
me.
And
I
then
think
this
he's
one,
pretty good.
this one was,
Yeah.
I think, abnormal, because usually she's
I'm
really
surprised
on
he's
it.
not
Yeah.
on here.
And he,
It's fine.
And I think these were the
So-
only ones that were low.
yeah.
So you guys are just gonna kind of finish, bless your hearts, it's time, deciding what you're gonna do, if you're gonna do that, how you're gonna do
Oh,
that
I see.
passage, or
So
what
this-
passages you're gonna do.
This one, Laura, that's what, he's impressed with me.
Yes,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
That, I mean, Brian and I have had.
Wow,
I mean, to
that's
go from
great.
here to this,
Mhm.
I mean, and that's almost too proficient. I mean, that's close.
Yeah, he has made some strides Well, he was
See,
going-
like these
And he was going with the line that he
three,
was
they
kind of.
shouldn't be having, none of these should be having problems here. This is
Well,
the
the
one that
social
could
can
be.
also affect them a little bit too at this